In this video, we're going to demonstrate the basic disassembly, reassembly, parts identification, and maintenance of the FT-12 marker. You're first going to want to start off by removing your air source. As you can see, we obviously don't have an air source on this marker. And then from there, you're also going to want to check to make sure that the marker is decocked. So you're going to push your safety to fire and pull the trigger and make sure that the marker is no longer cocked. From there, we're going to remove our barrel. And then we have our barrel collar. And on the front side of the grip, and this is kind of hard to see, there's a small button on the front side of the grip. You're going to push that button down and then rotate the collar. And that's going to free that collar up. So you'll unthread your barrel collar, and then from there you're going to hinge the marker. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Just hinge it, and you can remove the top portion of the receiver. Now from there you can see you have your buffer O-ring, your guide pin and your drive spring, your rear bolt with the rear bolt O-ring, your linkage arm, your power tube and valve assembly, which is housed inside the power tube, and your front bolt. From there, we're going to just remove the linkage arm, our drive spring and guide pin, along with that buffer O-ring. I usually keep those all together as one assembly. Then from there, you can remove your rear bolt, your front bolt, and then to remove your valve and power tube assembly, you just simply pull straight up and out. So there's your valve and power tube assembly. Set that off to the side. As you can see, you also have your ball latch, just like on the 98 Custom and A5 marker. If you ever need to replace your ball latch for whatever reason, it's very simple, very easy to do. You're just going to remove your front grip by sliding it forward, and then we can flip that over and you can see where that ball latch sits. And you can just remove that. Sometimes it's recessed in there, so you'll need to have a small screwdriver and you can just pull that out. But that's how you gain access to your ball latch. So we'll go ahead and put our front grip back on there. Now to remove your trigger and your trigger assembly, it's very, very, very simple. Just pull up by where the safety is. Just pull straight up, and it hinges, just like the top of the receiver did. So you can pull that trigger assembly out. We'll set our lower receiver off to the side, and I'll kind of show you how to gain access to the trigger assembly. So this trigger assembly is held together by what I like to call it's like a clasp, just a little metal. I would call it a clasp, and you just hinge that over, and then from there you can just kind of pull that assembly apart there. Now you want to be careful because sometimes your safety will come out with it. But here you have your trigger assembly, your trigger, the linkage arm for your trigger, and your sear, along with your sear spring, and obviously your safety in the front. Very rarely, you'd ever take this apart. You can take it apart to clean it, but it very, very rarely gets dirty. I usually just leave it assembled and just kind of wipe off the exterior. And just snap that clasp back over, and it was pretty audible. You could hear it snap back into place, and that's going to hold that trigger assembly together. So now we'll go back to the lower part of the receiver. One nice thing about the FT-12 is there are no grip screws. These grips actually snap onto the interior gas line there, and I'll show you how to remove those grips real quickly. At the very bottom of the left-hand side of the grip, you have a small slot for a slotted screwdriver or a flathead screwdriver. And you'll just put that in there and just pop up the grip. And you can just pull the rest of the grip off by hand. Now you can see how that kind of snaps into place on your gas line here. Really nice to be able to remove those grips if you ever have to remove your gas line for whatever reason. Or say for instance you need to change an O-ring on the inside of the tank adapter. But once again, that's very rare that you would ever have to do that. So just kind of showing you how those grips come apart. So we'll go ahead and snap that back into place. And we'll start our reassembly. You have your trigger assembly, and you always want to make sure that you start with the rear end of the trigger assembly going into the back end of the receiver, and you tilt it back forward. So you're going to start like this, and then you're going to lay it down in there flat. Now, if you try to just put it in there flat like this, you try to put it in there level, it'll never fit. It has to hinge in the back side of the receiver. So you're going to, like I said, start with the back end and just kind of lay that forward until it drops and seats completely into place there. Okay. Now you have your valve and your power tube assembly. And you're going to want to make sure, this is called your gas line joint. You're going to want to make sure that you get that lined up correctly with your gas line. So, you're just kind of going to eyeball that and just make sure that when you slip it in there, you're not jamming it on there. You're just kind of sliding it on there until it's seated. If you go in there and you try to force it, you can cut that O-ring on the inside of the gas line joint. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. Okay, from there, go ahead and put our front bolt back on. And we'll put our rear bolt back into place. And usually when I have this marker apart, I'll put a few drops of oil just right here on the rear bolt O-ring, and that's going to keep it well lubricated. I mean, that's really the only lubrication point for this particular marker. We really don't lubricate anything else on this marker other than just that rear bolt O-ring. So you got your rear bolt back in place and your linkage arm. Now, on the top of the power tube, there's these grooves, just 3 little grooves. Now, when you put your linkage arm back into place, you're going to put it in the hole of the front bolt and then connect it to your rear bolt. You're going to want to make sure that you get that linkage arm in those 3 grooves on top of the power tube. That's what guides the linkage arm straight when the bolt assembly is moving back and forth. So you want to make sure that you get that linkage arm back in properly. Now from there, you're going to go ahead and put your drive spring, your guide pin, and your buffer O-ring assembly in. And you're just going to compress that. And I usually use the side of the receiver here to help guide it. You're going to push that back into the small groove of your receiver. From there, you're going to have your upper receiver, and you're going to hinge that back over. Once you have that in place, you're going to take your barrel collar and you're going to thread that back on. Now once you get all the way down to the bottom, it's going to start to push on this, I don't know what you would call that, more of a locking pin or a locking mechanism for the collar. And you'll hear it snap into place once you get to a certain point. So let me go ahead and do that again so you can actually hear it. And you also saw how that popped back out. Now that's going to indicate that your barrel collar is locked down and it's not going to move. Another safety feature too to keep that from moving, or coming loose is the barrel. That barrel, once you have your barrel threaded in, there's no way that this collar can come out. So we'll go ahead and thread our barrel back in. And that is the disassembly, reassembly, and basic maintenance of the FT-12 marker.